Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Crypto Standard podcast with me, Jim.
And me, Jay.
So, Jordan, I'm telling you, I'm not going to mess about this morning. I don't want any of your flummery. I don't want to hear how many tacos you've had. I just want to introduce our guest straight away because we're so excited to have him. We have got Jeff Booth, the author of The Price of Tomorrow. How are you, Jeff?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, so good to have you on the pod. I was saying, Jordan and I have read that everyone must read The Price of Tomorrow to really understand what's going on, and just to have you on because we listened to you in podcasts over a year ago, and we've followed you on your journey in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and inflation, and here we are with inflation going crazy.
Yeah, here we are.
So, right. Do you want me to kick off?
Where are you based?
I'm based in Vancouver.
Yeah. And right now, just a quick one. You've got a politician over there. I'm not sure if you're a fan of his or not. Is it Pierre?
Yeah, Pierre. He's become a friend over the time. He read my book 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously curious enough to learn that something was wrong, and he kept on investigating. I probably talked to him a couple times a week, and so as he's learned more what's going on, and I think he's a good advocate for sound money. So what's happening?
Yeah, I've watched him in the House of Commons in Canada. I've also watched him on the Robert Breedlove podcast. And was he, Jeff, a year ago, you talked about talking to politicians or talking to people in government. I remember you said you were doing that. Was he one of them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and again, it's hard to know where, talking to you guys today, it's hard to know where your message resonates and where it lands and where people go after a message. But this kind of it's a pretty simple concept in my book. We have essentially the free market driven, and with technology driving what should be deflation, more for our time, more for less, and we have a system trying to stop that. And if you look through the world, every single island of information that people are fighting about is actually caused by that, and they don't know it. And so as people people understand this deeper, and so they're truly curious and want to understand it what we're dealing with at a first principles problem, that message seems to spread. And curious people want to look deeper and understand, okay, how do we fix the problem unless we know the root cause of the problem?
Yeah.
And
sorry, Jordan, very quickly. Pierre is an outlier in that if we were to talk to a Scottish politician right now and talk to them about this, I think they would be terrified, because it's like turkeys don't vote for Christmas, but he seems to have jumped out of the turkey pen. And
yeah, and can I just quickly add to that? So Trudeau and many of his team, I'm not sure for sure if Trudeau has read my book, but they all had access to early copies, advanced copies, because this was so important, and I wanted Canada to know about it early. And what you find is some people just aren't willing to listen. And some people aren't willing to look deeper. And what you realize from that is their control function can't handle that truth. And so I'm okay with somebody who doesn't understand it and wants to learn deeper. I'm not okay with somebody who's lying.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Right, let's get into it. And just for the audience, for every guest we have on, we just ask about a little bit about their background. And I'm curious how you got curious about Bitcoin. When did you first find it?
So when you're building a business, and I've built many businesses, but what you realize in that business, and what you think in the business, is it's all about the idea. What you realize as you're building a business, most of the times you're stopping its success. things that you're doing. So they and so those learnings to look deeper in you to be able to drive bigger learnings. And so while I was building a really substantial tech business, 2008 happened. And in that time, in 2008, we had containers, millions of dollars all around the world stuck at ports with letters of credit. And the reason it was stuck at ports is the counterparty bank at the other side in China or Turkey wouldn't accept our money. And we had lots of money, but they wouldn't. So everything just stopped, it ground to a halt. And what I realized is the entire financial system was unwinding in real time. And unless there was essentially socialization of losses, what the governments did at that time to be able to reward the architects of the crisis at the expense of the population, the entire system would have unwound at that time. And so then you have to ask yourself, is that fair? And what'll happen next time? Because you didn't make the problem go away, you made the problem bigger. And then early as Bitcoin came out, I had lots of technology, because it was a technology company. A lot of my coders were talking about this, and I was just too busy. I was just too busy in my business to really pay attention. It was interesting, but when you're slammed, when you have that big a company and everything else, you're just focused on the business. And it wasn't until later on, probably 2017, that I really that I bought my first Bitcoin, that I started to take this seriously. But it was actually on the way. The topic I talk about in Price of Tomorrow, I've been talking about for 10 years. And I've been trying to find a way, an elegant way to solve that problem. And it felt like nobody was putting the pieces together. And it just turned out that what I realized in the end is the system can't solve the problem from the system. And there was no way that, because the system would just keep on creating more inflation. That inflation would lead to greater control and a loss of individual rights and freedoms. And along the way, a whole bunch of people would keep voting for that system because they thought it provided safety when it provided the exact opposite of safety. And it needed to, you have to have a new system, a parallel system competing against that system. And that's when I realized that Bitcoin was the only thing, in my mind, it still is today, the only thing that could be a bridge to the other side. So 2017 is when I first Bitcoin, the thesis for Price of Tomorrow was in the making for 10 years before that.
Interesting. And as we've come through from when Bitcoin, the genesis of Bitcoin, and the early zealots or advocates, whatever you want to call them, they felt part of a subculture. It was kind of subculture-ish, edgy, rebel without a cause, rebel against the system. But do you feel now that whether it's a philosophy, a political ideal, has moved on and become very mainstream? Or do you still feel that based on its founding principles and what it wanted to be, it's still a subculture?
It's still early. And so to some people, if you asked honestly, not the people in the Bitcoin community that can't unsee it, but the general population that still doesn't know what you know, it's still really early. So it's not a subculture, but what I'd like to we can explore this, but a lot of people think one of those connected islands is social media, right? And people think it's social media's problem and we don't get the truth anymore. It's deeper than that. When you use money, when you have misinformation in money, you have misinformation everywhere. And so I just debated one of my good friends in YPO on the weekend about this concept. And I've talked about it before, but the printing press, what would it have looked like in that time that the printing press came out, when the church had all the power over all the control, and a bunch of people, and then the technology reduced the cost of access to information, where more people could participate. And what people miss about that is it's a two-way street. You could both provide more knowledge and get more knowledge. So essentially what you did at that time in history is you opened up a collective consciousness of the world as more people contributed instead of a centralized system. And it was likely chaotic if you were living at that time. A lot of the things that are happening today would have been happening at that time, as the church was losing its grip because the information it was saying was not true. And society grew as a result. We stand on the shoulders of greats that have gone before us, and that learning, if it's right, keeps getting better and better and better. So now enter social media or technology, and open technology first on the internet, that brought a whole bunch more minds to the system, and they all get to contribute and they get to learn. And the best ideas live on, and the worst you get to the rubbish bin. And that's how humanity. And now today we're going through that in an extremely accelerated pace. And it's converging everywhere. But the same process is taking place. It's just happening at it. Instead of driving 100,000 new minds to the global collective and that learning, you're driving billions. And so the rate is so much faster, and we can't see it because we're in it. The best, it just, and that's why I think why my book became a bestseller, and that's why these podcasts, because it's touching a lot of people, and it's forcing people to realize a truth. And they can fight the truth. They can close their minds to it, but it's still true.
Yeah. That is really, it's very powerful and cogent, because it's what Jordan and I were talking about recently, that we're actually in the throes of this change, this financial plumbing change that's going on just now. And you can see that with, when you look at like the amount of corporates for, I think we had KPMG Canada this week.
They bought it this week, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty big.
Yeah. And again, I think it's important, Jim, that a lot of people that are looking at this, or early looking at this, will be measuring it on price going up. But that means they're referencing it towards their existing fiat system, and they're caught in the system. What they should be doing is measuring everything against Bitcoin. And what you would see is the thesis of my book, where technology creates more abundance all the time, is prices will come down forever against Bitcoin. What that means is, even if you hate it, it helps you, right? Because the free market reduces cost, or the free market reduces cost.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the entrepreneurs going in to fix not just Bitcoin, but as a incentive system around the world, the output of their work is prices drop.
Yeah. So if I was to take that back right now to what I see in your country, in Canada, and I see people queuing up, literally queuing up to view houses, and the housing market in Canadian dollar price going through the roof, really they're not really making money when you compare that over the next 15 years against Bitcoin. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, my house fell 40% last year against Bitcoin.
Okay.
It's a measurement. People are measuring the system from the system and unable to see the problem.
Yeah.
And the system requires exponentially more easing of money, printing of money, to pretend to remain solvent.
Yes.
And the money is just an abstract concept for our time. And so that money, when you abuse that money, it's racing into stores of value like housing that people think is protecting them from that wealth destruction. The problem is, in Canada, or around the world, in Canada, you saw over 30% gains in pricing last year in housing. You also saw almost that in rent rises. So a whole bunch of people that are left on the bottom of this, that don't have access to that housing and can't afford the housing, just saw rent increases of 30%, and they can't afford it. And the food prices are, and the problem with the whole thing is they're going back to the same government who's creating the problem to save them. And it's and both and whatever side of the political divide you're on, if 2/3 of your tax revenue comes through a hidden theft that steals from one side of the population to give to the other side of the population, then and you're talking about the third of your tax revenue that is taxes, then you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And so all of most of the political divide right now is just a show. It's just a show, and because when the money is coming from socializing losses to try to create a systems solvency, it's just virtue signaling.
Jordan?
Yeah. That brings us actually really nicely onto my next question about how we've got this current financial system that is crumbling like in front of our eyes, and we've got this digital financial system that is emerging. So how do you see us transitioning from the old system to the new system? Because it can't be done in such a short period of time, because the people, like you say, the lower classes will really struggle because they can't even live in this financial system. So they don't have that spare cash.
Yeah, and what'll happen, Jordan, is and this is actually there are a whole bunch of risk events coming up, but laws change when one class of population is disadvantaged from another through and that class has kind of a revolution against the power on top, and they allow the laws to be changed. The problem is it's not a democracy if your entire democracy is based on a lie. So you can imagine what happens next with politicians telling another lie, that it's those people against those people. And a lot of people will buy it hook, line, and sinker because they're living in fear, and they're living in place where they can't feed their families. And society predictably disintegrates. And it's happened throughout time. Like if you study history, you can see this kind of time in a transition. Society disintegrates because they can't figure out what's happening, and it's easy to turn people against people. That's why I dedicated an entire chapter of the book to us versus them. And remember, this is way before a lot of this was evident to most people, because you could see the next steps of what would happen as a result of that manipulation. And so we're seeing that play out today. Now, for the people like you who have investigated Bitcoin at a deeper level, ask yourself what your world looks like this year, and how much hope you have. Now translate that into, now you'll probably still see what's going on, but you're probably doing this podcast so a whole bunch of other people can open their eyes and see what's happening. And so I find myself in this, I cannot believe what I get to do, not just in Bitcoin, but in business. And I cannot believe what I get to do every day. I'm surrounded by love, surrounded by people I think the most of. I'm just surrounded with opportunity. I can't believe I get to live in that world. But it's terrifying looking at the world through the eyes of a whole bunch of other people that are stuck in the existing status quo. And so that's actually why I would come on to this podcast for nothing, and to spend the time, because it's important for humanity to get to kind of create the bridge to the other side. And that's what Bitcoin becomes. It becomes a bridge to the other side: truth, hope, freedom.
Okay, and let's translate that to what's going on right now in El Salvador. So President Bukele has given everybody a wallet. Is it Chivo wallet? And he's given them $30 worth of Bitcoin locked up for 5 years. And he's going to create volcano bonds and all the rest of it, all that sort of stuff. Now, he's handed them, are we saying he's handed them some hope? So right now, I have to put my hand out, he says, every year to the IMF, and the IMF I borrow money at onerous terms, and it's just the way life is. But now what I'm doing is I'm giving you all a Bitcoin wallet. We're buying some Bitcoin, and we're going to have a side experiment. So is that side experiment in your eyes, Jeff, going to give, is that a hope experiment?
Yeah, 100%. And you can see this. I'm traveling to El Salvador this year, but from the people that I've been talking to that are on the ground there, this I know, they had 6% tourism increase in the fourth quarter last year. The only country that was positive tourism was El Salvador in the world. The innovation that's happening there, the business environment that's happening there, the hope for the population that's happening there is exactly what's happening. A whole bunch of entrepreneurs, the best and brightest minds are moving there because it becomes a free society. But again, and this is something, unless you know it, we're kind of up here, and a lot of people might question what you just said about the IMF and giving the, okay, if just ask this, where does the IMF get their money? And if the IMF can print money, or the US can print money to be able to give it to another country on onerous terms, and that country is indebted in servitude, indebted to that, and can't pay back that, but it's just a key entry and they can print it any time. Aren't you putting a population into, is effectively slavery?
Yeah,
based on that loan, and that's what you see all over the world.
Yeah,
and you see, and those populations now have an opportunity to step out of a system that is based on a lie and build a new system. And so that's what's happening.
Wow. Jordan?
So they've adopted Bitcoin both as legal tender and they are accumulating as well. Do you think at this stage, making it legal tender is the right thing to do? Or do you think it should just be acting as like your savings account?
So I wrote a post called "The Greatest Game" that explores this. I'm not sure if you read it. You can put it in the show.
I'll link it below.
But it laid out what was going to happen next and why governments were forced into this. And in that post, I actually didn't see a country putting it onto a currency as early as El Salvador did. And the reason I didn't see that is I have a bias from my point of view. And in Western worlds, we don't have the volatility in our currency. And so my point of view was nobody's going to take that volatility at this point. But if you're a different nation and you've gone through these currency failures over and over and over again, and you realize it's upwardly volatile, but I'm building wealth for my population the entire time, and they have a choice of being able to convert it to US or it makes perfect sense from another nation. Again, it was my view, my biased view, that didn't see that there was already a 10x advantage for them to use it as a currency. There just wasn't a 10x advantage for somebody in Canada right now, but there will be.
One of the other discussions that people have on Bitcoin about where it's going is a store of value. And it's so funny. I do laugh on Twitter when we talk about this guy called Peter Schiff. He's quite funny, and there's so many people have a go at him, and he's a go at them. It's just like but do you see, moving on from the currency, do you see Bitcoin as a store of value over the next, let's call it 10 years?
Yeah, and Chef, it's theater, right? A lot of this theater. His son's on one side on Bitcoin, and he's on gold, and so we'll put it this way: he's hedged.
Yeah, he's hedged.
It's just theater. And we used to ride horses until a better technology came around for transportation. Technologies, we used to use gold until a better technology came along for money, and that's what's happening. A technology is superior to gold in that You just have to ask yourself this pretty simple question. Can gold transfer economic value around the world at the pace of the internet, with more and more online, without building a system on top of gold? And that's what's always happened. So you built a system, a credit-based system on top of gold. The gold over time got taken out of the system, and you were left with just a credit-based system that people could manipulate. But what I think about that in that is human nature. If you could control a system for your benefit over somebody else's cost, human nature, whether it's country, whether it's a small group, human nature says you will. And so that's what's happened to gold over time, because it had to be centralized. Over time, it was always controlled, and the nation that had it won, and the nation that didn't, or you change the peg rates around the world to it and revalue it. And you could take it back because it had to be centralized, and people didn't realize that they didn't actually have control of the gold. They had control of a credit note over top of the gold. And so a new technology, Bitcoin, that's congruent to where we're going with that's a bearer asset all over the world. I can trade with anybody at any time and nobody could stop me. That's decentralized. It's hard to stop. And actually, the bigger question is, why would you want to? You have to ask yourself, if you're not for Bitcoin, what are you for? Right? You're for corruption. You're for a system that is based on theft. You're for ever increasing control in hands of few at the expense of many. That's what you're for. You might not know that, but if you're not for Bitcoin, what are you for?
It's so hard when that question you've asked there I'm sitting writing screeds. It's mind-boggling what you could write in a page about that. But if I asked that question to Scotland's First Minister just now, she wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about.
No, I realize that, and it's because they're living in a system that is being manipulated, and that whole system. What they might be asking, let's say they know what we're talking about. I suspect very few do. But if they do know what we're talking about, they might tell you, if we let this system fail, if we don't print, there's going to be riots on the street because every bank collapses, and food processing collapses. Everything, our whole economic system is built on top of this lie. And if we don't keep going, the whole system collapses. By the way, they'd be right.
Yeah.
So it becomes willful blindness instead of investigating what can transition us to the other side. And when I wrote the book, I was hoping to inspire this debate, because I wanted to see who was willing, curious enough to say, this is important. This is really important. We could be different sides of it, but unless you can show me, provide an alternative from the existing system that can provide an alternative without consolidation of all power in government and us as working slaves, or war and reset. Provide that alternative, and I'm wide open. I'm wide open to listen, but I have not seen that alternative yet. And that's where I've become a very outspoken advocate for Bitcoin. And it's not that wouldn't listen to other alternatives. I want to listen to other alternatives, but seeing none makes me, and what you see out of the existing system, firms my belief in where we're going.
And I wonder if that ties into what Jordan discussed earlier about we can't switch the printing press off overnight, because there will be riots and people's pensions will not get paid and savings policies will go to zero. So is this a 25-year transition? and started by people like El Salvador and in other countries where we slowly transition over, and you can see one experiment and another one petri dish working really well while the other one's still needing fed.
Yeah, that's what happens, but it accelerates on both sides. So the acceleration is, and it's hard to tell the breaking point. I've said many times which snowflake causes the avalanche. We're dealing with lots of snowflakes right now, and people are looking at the individual snowflakes thinking that that's the problem instead of the entire system that's failing in real time. And this might be easier for people to grasp if they want to start to look down the rabbit hole. It makes total sense that technology produces more for less. It's all over in our lives. We wouldn't be able to have this conversation on Zoom right now that could touch millions of people for free. That all that content is completely free today, and it never was. So 20 years ago, you had to centralize information because it moved so slowly, and people curated that information, whether it was a newspaper or somebody else, and they added their own bias to that information. And today it doesn't look like that. And it's moving faster and faster and faster. So that technology that's driving that abundance in our lives, that we can access anything, is coming to just about every industry. So what you just naturally say is, we should be getting more for less at an ever increasing pace. But we're living in the exact opposite world, where because of money printing, its prices are moving up faster and faster and faster. And what's causing people to be on a mouse wheel, racing harder and harder and harder, working harder and harder to try to keep up to this nonsense, which is just manufactured or just manipulated, is what we're talking about. So what would, really simple question, if a technology entrepreneur like me, my labor rate went up because of printing, might I have to reduce my labor faster with technology to be able to win the market? And if I didn't win the market, then somebody else would. And so you're actually, what's happening is one system is moving faster and faster this way, feeding back on itself, and the other system has to move faster and faster in response. And so what you're seeing is a greater and greater divide of society as those two systems get further and further away from each other.
Okay. So if you look at other nation states, let's move it to China and Russia. So China effectively did ban Bitcoin last year. It's gone. All the miners have all left. They've made it illegal to, I think, own cryptocurrency or deal in it. Where do you think Russia is right now because it's made some noises about Bitcoin, but this is the USE is not the interesting one for us. Russia's interesting, depending where it's going to go with the petrodollar and.
Oh, this is a complicated topic, and so at a high level, Pat, Bitcoin is cannot work in a communist country, right? So because it removes power from the state and gives power to its population. So it's no doubt why China banned it, because it's incongruent with where they're going. They have to control their population, otherwise the population will rise up. Same thing, and that's when you saw Russia trying to ban it. But then when you think about game theory, what's happening in the Ukraine right now, the US could cut off Russia's from SWIFT system, the economic underpinning of the world, tomorrow. And on Bitcoin, on the network, you couldn't be cut off. You could trade with anybody in real time. It's an open access system. So one of the things that in the political debate, the people talk about, oh, that country is up for it, that you need to get used to your adversary is going to use it too. But in using it, they make it stronger for everybody, and they fix the incentive system of the world. Because if the adversary uses it, well, their population wins, they lose their power over time. And that natural benefit, it just keeps on accelerating. So I suspect it's going to be of national importance. You're going to create game theory here where it's of national strategic importance that governments start going earlier and either mining it, bringing it on themselves, or buying it.
Oof.
Yeah, and that ties into Biden apparently preparing an executive order to make Bitcoin and cryptocurrency a matter of national security, because we've done a podcast 2 episodes ago all about game theory, and what we are seeing is these countries on a national level now, it's crazy. They are seeing if Russia adopts it and embraces it a little, then they have to do the exact same, otherwise they get left behind.
Yeah, and people think the US is one big giant country. It is, but the states have power.
Yeah.
There is no way Texas is going to turn off Bitcoin mining. No way. Like, good luck. They will divide from the nation before that happens. So there is no executive order that's going to come down and stop Bitcoin from moving, because the states have their own power.
So Jeff, this 45 minutes has just flown in, and I'm conscious that you've got a call in probably three minutes. But would you promise to come back and give the good people of the UK another 45 minutes of your time sometime?
Anytime, guys.
Because we haven't even scratched the surface here.
This has been a lot of fun. Anytime.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. And we're going to continue to chat, folks. But Jeff, we'll have you back within the next month, diaries permitting.
Okay, perfect.
Have a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Wow. That was that 45 minutes of Jeff there was just, I mean, we haven't scratched the surface. That was mind-blowing.
It's crazy. And that's why, like, I get everyone to read his book. Like, when they're coming into Bitcoin, it doesn't solely stay on cryptocurrency. It goes into like artificial intelligence as well. But it's just having that vision to see what is going to happen in the future. I'm planning for that right now.
It's interesting when you listen to a man of Jeff's intellect and the way he frames the debates, and you know he's put so much thought and research into it. I think it'd be difficult for any politician sitting in front of him for a couple of hours to enter into any debate about fiat currency and actually the future of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I just don't get, if there is a debate, say we have a high up official in government versus a Bitcoiner, let's just say, Jeff, what do the fiat currency lovers, what have they got to back up? Like, there is so much history of their currency getting debased, the currency that they back, the corruption, the lies. It's a lose-lose for them.
Interesting. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, Jordan, and it was it's a young lady, and she's going for sort of mayor, or I don't think it was governor, it was kind of mayor of some town in Arizona or city in Arizona.
Yes.
And between Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, as Jeff talked about, these states, if they want to have Bitcoin on their books, they're going to jolly well do it. And you could see it's almost like the marijuana thing in America, where, let's say, 20 odd states it's legal to grow, sell, and have marijuana. The other ones it's not, and that might be that's meant to be Bitcoin might go as well there.
I mean, yeah, that's totally possible, and it does come back to what we said on the podcast, or one of the episodes, and maybe 3-4 episodes ago, about it could potentially break up the United States, like, because we are seeing such a divide now, but we're still early and people are still learning about it. So I think as a country, they're going to have to embrace it, adopt it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So folks, we would urge you, if you can, to go on. I think you can get it on Audible, or you can buy it. It's called The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. Jeff has never asked us to plug it. I'd have to say, I think it was Chris. Was it Chris? It was Chris, our mate Chris, who told us about it. And it is a fantastic read. It's not too heavy, but it makes total sense in the way that Jeff's laid it out.
Yeah, I think it's good for especially people coming in. There is little bits that, yes, you might get a little bit confused, but you get the overall gist of what he is saying, and you will come out of it thinking like, wow. And I hand it to everyone that is coming into cryptocurrency. So before we get him on in however many weeks, I would say for every listener to get this book and read it, because then you will have more of an understanding of what he is actually saying.
Yeah. Can we put a link to his paper that he talked about?
Yes.
I haven't read that, so I'm going to read that.
Yeah.
Folks, that was an interesting almost an hour. And I have to say, I'm going to go away and I'm going to listen to this once Jordan's done his bit editing it, because every time Jeff speaks, I learn something new. And he's talking to politicians and senior entrepreneurs and business people, so they are listening.
Yeah, there was quite a few quotes in there, because I read the book probably about a year ago now, and there was quite a lot of quotes that he was just saying, and I was like, all right, I want to write this down.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And I think, did we have a wee bounce in crypto there? Was there a wee bounce in the crypto price for people feeling a wee bit more happy online, Jordan?
Yeah, we've had a little bit of bounce. We've gone into the 40s for now. So yeah, it's giving a little bit of hope, as we are seeing this institutional investment coming, well, these institutions coming in, and KPMG, as we talked about with Jeff.
Yeah, and there today, Wells Fargo. Now, Wells Fargo's got something like $2.1 trillion under management, and it came out today and talked about Bitcoin being a plausible investment asset for the future. This is all happening. I think this is another bank that years ago was like, Bitcoin's evil. Now it's researchers are saying, actually, we might be offering this to our high net worths very soon.
Yeah, they have to. And I'm also going to put a link to something I posted yesterday, and it was the former executive director of BlackRock. And BlackRock is the largest asset management company or firm in the world. They've got $9.5 trillion under management. 9.5. And he says that, look, you can listen to it and watch it, but it's phenomenal. He is just saying what is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years.
And as Jeff said, we're right in the throes of it. Okay, so that's the midweek. I think possibly towards the end of this week, we should maybe start thinking, doing a wee one in some altcoins, some Ethereum, some Cardano, and just find out where all that, because there's been a lot of focus on Bitcoin. But I think people can feel that Bitcoin isn't just some crypto project dreamed. It is permeating the globe.
You have to know about Bitcoin. That's why we have focused on it so much at the moment, because a nation's at this stage, a nation is not going to adopt Cardano, Ethereum, Solana as a legal tender, as a store of value. That's not going to happen. Bitcoin is going to be that one. And Bitcoin, as Jeff said, is the bridge between the old system and the new system. So learning what this bridge is before we go into altcoins, super important.
There you go. You can't say more than that. Have a great weekend. No, God, what day is it today?
It's Tuesday. Have a great,
happy
hump day, Wednesday.
We'll see you. Enjoy the podcast on Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
Bye.